Today we are discussing the evolution of democracy in Northern Europe. Which part of Europe? Which part? Okay. So, Northern Europe. Anybody can tell which countries are located in Northern Europe? No, it is Southern Europe. This is Southern Europe. I am asking about Northern Europe. Phil, okay? Okay, fine. Fine. So this is Northern Europe. And as you know, our today's discussion is based on Robert Dahl's book on democracy. It's chapter 2, which is titled as Democracy, Origin and Evolution. And its second part is Northern Europe. And we have already discussed the systems of popular government, systems of democracy in Greece, Rome, and Italy. They all lacked several of the crucial characteristics of modern representative government. Modern representative governments. Several aspects of modern representative government were lacking in those systems, which were adopted by the Greeks, Romans, and Italians long ago. Okay? So I think I have already discussed with you representation last week. Did we not discuss representatives? How do we elect our representatives and our representatives elect our rulers? We talked about it. Yes. So in those days, in the ancient times, there was no representation. It was direct democracy. So classical Greece was composed of popular local governments. Classical Greece. Medieval and Renaissance Italy was also composed of popular local governments. Okay? Medieval Italy and Renaissance Italy. It was also composed of popular local governments. But they lacked an effective national government. There are no national governments like we have in India and Pakistan and America. No, we have national governments, federal governments. Rome had just one local government based on popular participation. But it did not have any national parliament of elected representatives. So in Rome, there was no national parliament. There were no elected representatives. From today's perspective, absent from all these systems were at least three basic political institutions. From today's perspective, three basic political institutions were missing in those systems. Number one, there were no national parliaments. Number two, there were no elected representatives. Number three, there were no popularly chosen local governments that were ultimately subordinate to the national government. So now, in many countries, there are local governments as well. Sometimes here in Pakistan, we have local governments, union council, tehsil level, district level, they are called local governments. A system combining democracy at local levels with the popularly elected parliament at the top level had yet to be invented. So until then, this system of three years of government, it had not been invented. There was only one level of government, the city-state. This combination of political institutions originated in Britain, Scandinavia, the lowlands, and Switzerland, and elsewhere north of the Mediterranean. So, which combination of institutions? These three institutions talked about: parliaments, representatives, and local governments. Okay. These institutions, this combination of institutions, where did it originate? Britain, Scandinavia, Switzerland, lowlands into Switzerland, and in other places, which were in the north of Mediterranean. What does lowlands mean? What is lowlands? Lowland is the region of Scotland lying south and east of the Highlands. Okay, I have made mistake. This Scotland is different and Switzerland is different. I have put the Switzerland in brackets. That is not the case. I have made a typing mistake. Lowlands are in the Scotland and Switzerland and elsewhere. Okay? Everyone got it?
Yes, sir.
Yes. So the region of Scotland lying south and east of the Highlands is called the lowlands. ये देखिए ना, हम पाकिस्तान में कहते हैं ना, कुछ ये बालाई इलाके हैं, कुछ ज़ेरी इलाके हैं कि जैसे हम इधर शुमाल की तरफ जाते हैं तो वो सतह आपकी वो ऊंचाई आ देती है ना, सी लेवल से हाइट है ज़्यादा है, पहाड़ी इलाके ऊंचाई ज़्यादा है. जैसे जैसे इधर कराची की तरफ जाते हैं तो सतह समुद्र से गहरा जो बुलंदी है वो कम होती जाती है. तो वो जो रेलवे लाइन की टाइमिंग्स आप शेड्यूल पढ़ें ना, उसमें कहेंगे कि अप और डाउन. आप वो हैं जो पिंडी और पेशावर की तरफ जा रही हैं, उन ट्रेन को कहते हैं अप. जो नीचे जा रही है मुल्तान, भावलपुर, कराची की तरफ, उनको कहते हैं डाउन, क्योंकि वो इधर गहराई होती चली जा रही है, सतह समंदर से बुलंदी कम होती जा रही है, उधर बढ़ती जा रही है. इसी तरह स्कॉटलैंड में भी कुछ हाईलैंड्स हैं, कुछ लो लैंड्स हैं. सतह मुर्तफा पोठो आकर तो पता है सबको, वो मुर्तफा इर्तिफा से है ना, हाइट, वो बाकी पंजाब से ऊंचा है वो. तो इस सेंस में है ये. The patterns of political development diverged widely among these regions. So the regions which we are talking about, here the level of and the patterns of political development were different. They were not the same, they were divergent, they were different. A highly simplified version would look something like this. A highly simplified version. In various localities, freemen and nobles would begin to participate directly in local assemblies. Directly in local assemblies, freemen would participate, and nobles, the rich people, the wealthy people, they participated directly in local assemblies in, we are talking about Northern Europe. To these were added regional and national assemblies. These assemblies consisted of representatives. Some or all of these representatives would come to be elected. Sometimes all of the representatives, they were elected. Sometimes a part of them, a portion of them was elected. You know, in Pakistan, we have MPs, MNAs which are not elected. Anybody knows? No one knows? They are reserved seats in Punjab Assembly, in all assemblies, and in the National Assembly. Do you know? Reserved seats. You don't elect them. They are appointed by the party. They are appointed by the party. So similarly, in those times in Northern Europe, sometimes all the representatives, they were elected, and sometimes some of them were not elected. They were appointed. Okay, ji, local assemblies. Local assemblies, there is a subheading in your text, you can see. In Norway, there is a town named as Steinkjer. Steinkjer. It is a town where is it located? Norway. It is in Norway. Steinkjer is near the city of Trondheim. What is the name of the city? Trondheim. Trondheim is in which country? Norway. Yes. There is a boat-shaped ring like of large stones. Boat-shaped ring of large stones. At this place, Viking freemen regularly met from about 600 Christ era to 1000 Christ era. 600 CE to 1000 CE. Okay? Viking freemen, they would meet. They would hold their meetings over there. Here, they would hold an adjudicative assembly. Adjudication means to make decisions. Adjudicate, फैसले करना, अदालती फैसले करना, ठीक है, इसको एडजुडिकेशन कहते हैं. ये नहीं एक तरह की अदालत लगती थी वहाँ. In the Norwegian language, this assembly was called a ting. T-I-N-G, ting. और ये जो इंग्लिश में लफ्ज़ है ना थिंग, थिंग का ओरिजिन और इस टिंग का ओरिजिन सेम है, मिलते जुलते हैं. Similar places can be found elsewhere in the vicinity. In its vicinity, where there's a ring of stones, similar places can also be found. By 900 CE, assemblies of free Vikings were meeting in the Trondheim region. Such assemblies were also meeting in many other areas of Scandinavia. So Norway and these are countries, this region is called Scandinavian region, Scandinavian countries. So the ting was typically held in an open field. So there are no big buildings like we have the parliament and we have the halls, assembly halls, big halls. So at that time they didn't have such big halls, so they would meet in the open. It was marked off by large vertical stones. Large vertical stones were put around this place to mark it. At the meeting of the ting, the freemen settled disputes. When the meeting of this ting was held, okay, ting means the thing of the people, commonwealth, okay, or assembly. So the freemen would gather over there, they would hold meetings and they would settle disputes, adjudicate. They discussed, they accepted or rejected laws. They adopted or turned down a proposed change of religion. So in those meetings, number one, they would settle their disputes. Number two, they would make laws. They would accept or reject laws. Number three, they adopted or turned down a proposed change of religion. Sometimes they would change their religion altogether by making a law, by making a decision in the ting, in the assembly. As they did when they accepted Christianity in place of the old Norse religion. So in Norway, their assembly made a decision that no, they will become Christians. This decision was made where? Where was this decision made? Who made this decision to adopt Christianity? So this was the power of the people. A king could not be king without the approval of the assembly. King was often required to swear his faithfulness to the laws approved by the king. So the laws made by the king, they were powerful. The king had to abide by those laws. The Vikings knew little or nothing about the democratic and republican political practices 1,000 years earlier in Greece and Rome. So these Vikings in Norway, they had not much knowledge about the ancient Greece, ancient Rome, ancient Italy, about their popular governments. So Robert Dahl, in fact, is trying to say that Norwegians invented many things about these popular governments. They seem to have created assemblies on their own. The Norwegians, they seem to have created the assemblies on their own. They did so operating from the logic of equality. Okay? Now, you note, you must have noted, Robert Dahl again and again mentions the logic of equality. It is the first and foremost requirement of any democracy that all citizens are equal in the eyes of the law. Okay? They have equal opportunities, they have equal rights. If there is no equality of law, equality of opportunity, there can be no democracy. There can be no democracy. So, the Norwegians did so. They created their assemblies on their own, operating from the logic of equality. They applied the logic of equality to free men. So, all free Norwegians, they were equal. The idea of equality was alive and well among Viking freemen in the 10th century after the Christ. It is attested to by an event, and Robert Dahl mentions an event here. What is the event? Some Danish Vikings were traveling up a river in France. Danish means citizens of Denmark. Citizens of Denmark are called Danish or Danes, D-A-N-E-S, Danes. So they were traveling in France along a river. Someone asked them, "What is the name of your master?" Someone asked them, "What is the name of your master?" They replied, "None." They replied, "None. We are all equals. We are all equals. We have no master." Okay? It means they believed in equality, Norwegians. And because they believed in equality, this is the reason they created the democratic system of government. But we must resist the temptation to exaggerate. Robert Dahl is warning us. Although those Vikings, they believed in equality, but we should not exaggerate. There were several problems with equality. What were the problems? The equality that Vikings boasted about applied only among free men. So the people who were not free, they were not equal. Even free men varied in wealth and status. Among free men, some were rich, some were not much rich. So their status was different. Beneath the free men were the slaves. There were above, there were the free men. Beneath them, there were the slaves. The Vikings possessed slaves. So the slaves were their possessions. They owned them. उनकी मिल्कियत थे. Like the Greeks and Romans. वो पुराने ज़मानों में जो Greeks और Romans थे, उनके भी slaves होते थे. Or for that matter, Europeans or Americans centuries later. आपको पता है ये अपना अमेरिका में भी slaves होते थे. इब्राहिम लिंकन के भी slaves थे. ठीक है, इब्राहिम लिंकन तो बहुत पुराना तो नहीं है, लेकिन उसी ने फिर वो काम भी बहुत किया इसके हवाले से, स्लेवरी को ख़त्म करने के लिए. तो यूरोप में भी स्लेव्स होते थे, पूरी दुनिया में होते थे. अभी हम बात कर रहे थे ना कल परसों, देयर वर मार्केट्स ऑफ स्लेव्स, देयर वाज स्लेव ट्रेड, मंडियां लगती थी, इंसान बिकते थे. तो ये इश्यूज भी थे. At the same time, when the people, the free men, were creating the assemblies based on the logic of equality, equality among the free men. Among the slaves were, who were the slaves? Number one, enemies who were captured in battle. There would be wars, and the winning side would capture the defeated side, their people, and those people would become their slaves. Similarly, the hapless victims of raids on neighboring peoples. So some tribes raided, हमला करते थे दूसरे ट्राइब के ऊपर. और उनको पकड़ के ले आते थे, उनको स्लेव बना लेते थे, या एक मुल्क ने हमला कर दिया दूसरे के ऊपर, उनको पकड़ के ले आए. Among the slaves were persons simply bought in the ancient and ubiquitous commerce in slaves. तो जब वे खरीद लेते थे, या तो जो शिकस्त खुदा होते थे उनको स्लेव बना लेते थे, या फिर हमला करते थे किसी और दूसरों के ऊपर पकड़ के लाते थे, या फिर खरीद लेते थे, तो वो ये सारे स्लेव्स होते थे. When slaves were freed, they remained dependent on their previous owners. तो वो स्लेव्स बेचारे क्योंकि बचपन से यानी तवील अरसा जिंदगी का उनका स्लेवरी में गुजर जाता था, या बाई बर्थ ही स्लेव होते थे, तो जब उनको आज़ाद कर देते थे तब भी वो डिपेंडेंट ही रहते थे अपने मालकों, पिछले मालकों के ऊपर. स्लेव्स वर ए कास्ट बिलो द फ्री मैन. तो वो एक ऐसी बरादरी थी स्लेव्स की जो आज़ाद मर्दों के मातहत थी. अबव द फ्री मैन वाज एन अरिस्टोक्रेसी. तो फ्री मैन के ऊपर जो थी अशराफिया, अरिस्टोक्रेसी थी, बहुत जो वेल्दी लोग होते हैं. Aristocracy composed of families with wealth and hereditary status. They had wealth and they had a special status in the society. Wealth was usually in land. So in those times, there were no mills and factories. There was no industries as such. So wealth was mainly of land, in land. At the top, there would be a king. There would be a king. Power of the king was limited by at least three things. So, although there was democracy, but they also had kings. Even today, you know, in the United Kingdom, there is a king. Do you know this?
Yes, sir.
Who is the king of the United Kingdom? Yes, Andrew Charles. So, before him, her mother was the queen. Queen Elizabeth, who she has recently died. So power of the king was limited by at least three things. Number one, his election. The kings would be elected. So no one could become king without election on his, according to his own will. Number two, his obligation to obey the laws. So in the democratic system, the king had to obey the laws. Huh?
इलेक्शन के बगैर भी नहीं किंग, मतलब एक उसका फौत हुआ, उसका जान छीना बेटा.
But not in this system. Those systems are not democratic. If someone becomes a king without election or without consent of the people, that is not democracy. For example, in the Arab world, there are many kings, hereditary kings. So those Arab states, they are not democracies. So yes, Andrew Charles, he has become king. He is also a hereditary king, but he does not have powers. They are figurehead kings, nominal. They have nominal powers. Do you know? Andrew Charles in Britain, he doesn't have any legal powers. He cannot make laws. He cannot change laws. So he is a symbol, just symbol of monarchy, symbol of UK, head of the state. That's it. So if there are kings, hereditary kings in a democratic systems, they are under the constitution. They don't have powers to make policy or to change the laws. So this is the difference between a democratic system and an authoritarian system. In authoritarian systems, the kings are not elected and they have all the powers. Number three, the king needed to retain the loyalty of the nobles and the support of the freemen. So these are three checks on the power of the king. Number one, he would be elected. Number two, he would abide by the laws. Number three, he needed the loyalty of the nobles and support of the freemen. So in spite of these severe limits on equality, the class of freemen was large enough. The class of freemen was large enough. The class of freemen could impose a lasting democratic influence on political institutions and traditions. So they could influence these institutions, they could influence the traditions. Among free men were free peasants, smallholders, and farmers. Who are the smallholders? जिनके पास थोड़ी थोड़ी ज़मीन होती है, स्मॉल होल्डर. कुछ कईयों के पास बहुत बड़ी ज़मीन होती है, जागीरदार होते हैं. कुछ काश्तकार होते हैं, उनके पास थोड़ी थोड़ी ज़मीन होती है. उनको उसने कहा है स्मॉल होल्डर्स. फ्री पेरेंट्स, स्मॉल होल्डर्स एंड फार्मर्स, ये भी इनमें से भी ये भी लोग फ्री मैन के में थे. In several other parts of Europe, local conditions also sometimes favored the emergence of popular participation in government. In other parts of Europe, so far we have talked about the Southern Europe and the Northern Europe, okay? But in other parts of Europe, sometimes the circumstances favored participation in government. Freemen engaged in pastoral activities in the high mountain valleys of the Alps, for example. Alps का पता है आप लोगों को? ALPS, Alps. हैं? Alps ये जैसे हमारे यहाँ को हिमालय और को कराकरम है, ये तो बहुत बड़े हैं ना. यूरोप में ये पहाड़ों का सिलसिला है, पहाड़ी सिलसिला है यूरोप में, एल्प्स. ओके, एल्पाइन इसी से बना है. तो वो जो ये स्विट्जरलैंड और ये जिस तरह की कंट्रीज है ना, ये उधर फैला हुआ है. ये बहुत बड़ा सिलसिला है, पहाड़ी सिलसिला है, एल्प्स. ये उसकी बात हो रही है. पेस्ट्रल एक्टिविटीज क्या होती हैं? ये जो चराते नहीं, जानवर चराते हैं, भेड़ बकरे चराते हैं, भैंसें गाय चराते हैं, ये इसको इस एक्टिविटी को कहते हैं पेस्ट्रल. पास्चर से पड़ा हुआ है ना, चरागाह को क्या कहते हैं? पास्चर. तो पेस्ट्रल एक्टिविटीज वो जो जानवर चराने की बात है ना, उसकी बात हो रही है. फ्री मैन एंगेज्ड इन पेस्ट्रल एक्टिविटीज इन द हाई माउंटेन वैलीज ऑफ द एल्प्स, फॉर एग्जांपल. Such condition provided them a measure of protection and authority. So ये जो स्विट्जरलैंड है ना, इसके चारों तरफ ऊंचे पहाड़ हैं, तो इसको फतह करना बहुत मुश्किल होता था. हाँ, उनको फौज की ज़रूरत ही नहीं. हाँ, वो खुद ही लड़ लेते हैं जब ज़रूरत पड़ती है. कोई हमलावर आता है ना, तो वो टेरेन उनकी इतनी फेवर में है, वो हमलावर संभल ही नहीं पाता, वो उसको वो शिकस्त दे देते हैं. तो इस तरह वो जो एल्पाइन एरिया था, एल्प्स के अंदर इस तरह की वादियाँ थी, तो वहाँ पे लोगों को इतना ख़तरा नहीं था कि हमलावर आएंगे और उनको फतह कर लेंगे. तो वो फिर काफ़ी हद तक इस परेशानी से आज़ाद थे. तो उनके अंदर फिर इक्वालिटी की और डेमोक्रेसी की ये जो थी ना, ये चीज़ ये डेवलप होती थी. तो वही कह रहा है, सच कंडीशन प्रोवाइडेड देम ए मेजर ऑफ प्रोटेक्शन एंड ऑटोनॉमी. रेटिया और रेशिया, ये भी एक प्रोविंस था. रेटिया वाज एन एंशिएंट रोमन प्रोविंस, ये रोम में था. लेटर इट बिकेम ए स्विस कैंटन, फिर ये स्विट्जरलैंड का पार्ट बन गया. ए मॉडर्न राइटर डिस्क्राइब्स रेटिया अराउंड 800 CE, 800 क्राइस्ट ईरा. यानी 800 ईस्वी में रेटिया के बारे में एक राइटर ने लिखा है. Free peasants found themselves in a uniquely egalitarian situation. Egalitarian मुसावात को कहते हैं, egalitarianism, equality को कहते हैं, egalitarianism. हाँ, egalitarian जो मुसावात पे यकीन रखते हैं ना, egalitarian. Believing in or based on the principle that all people are equal and deserve equal rights and opportunities. Okay, ji. Yes, we are discussing the evolution of parliaments from assemblies to parliaments. So we have just talked about the evolution of assemblies in Norway, the evolution of assemblies in Switzerland, and in other parts of Europe. And now Robert Dahl is going to tell us how parliaments evolved, how parliaments were established in various parts of Europe. So the Vikings ventured westward to Iceland. They transplanted their political power practices in Iceland. In several localities, they recreated a ting. But they did more, foreshadowing a later appearance of national parliaments elsewhere. Foreshadow. Foreshadow means to come before, यानी किसी चीज़ से पहले आना, ठीक है, यानी बाद में जो आने वाली पार्लियामेंट्स थी, नेशनल पार्लियामेंट्स थी, उनकी तरह की एक चीज़ उन्होंने बना दी उस वक्त, ठीक है. Foreshadowing the later appearance of national parliaments elsewhere. In 930 CE, they created a sort of supra-ting. First, there was a ting, that was the assembly. Now they formed a supra-ting, that was like the National Assembly. All things. Supra-ting means all thing, or National Assembly. This National Assembly remained the source of Icelandic law for 3 centuries. 3 centuries in Iceland it worked. Meanwhile, in Norway, in Denmark, and in Sweden, regional assemblies developed. Regional assemblies developed in Norway, Denmark, and Sweden in the meanwhile. Then developed national assemblies as in Iceland. Subsequently, the power of the king and the centralized bureaucracies under his control grew. So, after that, the power of the king increased, and the kings had strong bureaucracies. Those bureaucracies were in the control of the king. So, bureaucracies became powerful, kings became more powerful. It reduced the importance of these national assemblies. So, ये एक और बड़ी रुकावट होती है जमहूरियत के रास्ते में, ब्यूरोक्रेसी. ब्यूरोक्रेसी पाकिस्तान में आपको पता है कितनी दफ़ा इन्होंने जमहूरियत को ब्यूरोक्रेट्स ने पटड़ी से उतारा है, ठीक है. सिविल ब्यूरोक्रेट्स कौन कौन थे जो वज़ीर आला बन गए, वज़ीर आज़म बन गए और गवर्नर जनरल बन गए, किसी को पता है? सिविल ब्यूरोक्रेट्स. आप फिर हिस्ट्री पढ़ें, पाकिस्तान की पॉलिटिकल हिस्ट्री पढ़ें. शुरू के ज़माने में ये बन गए थे, गवर्नर जनरल बन गए थे. हाँ, मेरा ख्याल है गुलाम मोहम्मद ये ब्यूरोक्रेट नहीं था. हाँ, तो ये पावर को कैप्चर कर लेते हैं, तो इससे फिर ये डेमोक्रेसी वीक होती है. So it reduced the importance of these national assemblies, but these national assemblies left their mark on later developments. For example, there was a tradition of popular participation in the assemblies in Sweden during the Viking period. This tradition of popular participation led in the 15th century to a precursor of a modern representative parliament. Precursor भी foreshadower की तरह है. Precursor पेश आवट जो पहले आता है, ठीक है. तो वो जो वहाँ पर रवायत थी ना पॉपुलर पार्टिसिपेशन की, तो उसके बाद उसकी वजह से बाद में जो आने वाले सिस्टम्स थे पॉपुलर गवर्नमेंट के, उनका उस पर असर था. It happened when the king began to summon meetings of representatives from different sectors of Swedish society. Now, the kings, sometimes the elected system, the system of representatives, it supported the kings sometimes. The representatives came from nobility, from clergy, from burghers. Burghers, it is also a class, an upper class, and common people. These meetings eventually evolved into the Swedish parliament. Now we are discussing Swedish parliament. Environment of the Netherlands and Flanders was radically different. Here, the expansion of manufacturing, expansion of commerce, and finance helped to create urban middle classes. Now, here the industrialization had started. Where? In Netherlands and in Flanders. And due to the industrialization and commerce and finance, middle classes, urban middle classes emerged. These urban middle classes composed of persons who commanded sizable economic resources. Sizable economic resources. Rulers perpetually starved for revenues. The kings, the rulers, they needed taxes, they needed income, they needed revenue. So they could not ignore this rich class because they wanted tax from the rich people from the middle class. So they wanted to have their consent, to have their support. And the rulers could not tax this rich class without gaining its consent. To obtain consent, rulers summoned meetings of representatives. So, to obtain their consent, the rulers, the kings, they summoned the meetings of their representatives. The representatives were drawn from the towns and the most important social classes. These assemblies and parliaments were often called as estates, Estates, estates. These assemblies and parliaments, when the French Revolution took place, all of you know about the French Revolution? When did it take place? 1789. 1789, I think. So, anybody knows how many estates were there in the French Parliament at that time, before the revolution? There were three states, three estates with E. This estate is with E. The nobility, the clergy, and the common people. Okay? So these were the three estates in the French Parliament. They did not evolve directly into the national legislatures of today. There were differences. यानी आज की जो पार्लियामेंट है उस वक्त की पार्लियामेंट में फ़र्क था. तो ये रॉबर्ट डाल ये भी कह रहा है कि ये नहीं है कि जी वो बराह रास्त आज की पार्लियामेंट की तरह बन गए. वो एवोल्यूशन हुआ है, फिर उसके बाद चेंजेस आती रही हैं उसमें. They established traditions, practices, and ideas that strongly favored such a development. Meanwhile, from obscure beginnings, a representative parliament was gradually coming into existence. In the centuries to come, that representative parliament would exert far and away the greatest influence on the idea and on the practice of representative government. तो वो जो चीज़ें वहाँ उन्होंने शुरू की, वो बाद में आने वाले जो रिप्रेजेंटेशन के सिस्टम्स थे, उनके ऊपर बहुत दूररस असरात मुरतब हुए. This was the parliament of medieval England. ये इंग्लैंड की बात हो रही है. इंग्लैंड की डेमोक्रेसी बहुत पुरानी है. It was a product less of intention and design than of blind evolution. तो उसमें कोई बहुत बड़ा वो कह रहा है कि कोई डिज़ाइन नहीं था, लेकिन ये था कि वो बस इवाल्व होती गई. मे भी हो सकता गैर इरादी तौर पर इवाल्व होती गई इंग्लैंड की पार्लियामेंट. The English Parliament grew out of assemblies during the reign of Edward I from 1272 to 1307. ये 13वीं 14वीं सदी की बात हो रही है इंग्लैंड में. वो एडवर्ड द फर्स्ट वहाँ पे किंग था, तो उसके ज़माने में पहले असेंबलीज थी, असेंबलीज से फिर आगे पार्लियामेंट बन गई, इंग्लैंड की पार्लियामेंट. These assemblies were summoned sporadically. अब वो जो असेंबलीज होती थी उनका कभी कभी इजलास होता था, बाकायदा इजलास नहीं होते थे. They were summoned under the pressure of need. तो जब भी किंग पे प्रेशर आता था उस वक्त वो असेंबली के इजलास बुलाता था. जब उसको जरूरत नहीं पड़ती थी तो उनके इजलास होने नहीं देता था. How parliament evolved from these beginnings is a lengthy and complex story. आपको पता है वो क्रॉमवेल का ज़माना, ये बरतानिया में वो जो बादशाह था वो पार्लियामेंट का इजलास नहीं होने देता था। एक तवील अरसा वहाँ पे 100 साल से ज़्यादा पार्लियामेंट का इजलास ही ना हुआ। वो बादशाह इतने तगड़े थे। तो फिर पार्लियामेंट ने जंग लड़ी बादशाह के खिलाफ, वो पार्लियामेंट वाले जीत गए। फिर बादशाह को फांसी पे लटकाया, उसको सजा दी, कत्ल कर दिया। By the 18th century, however, that evolution had led to a constitutional system. In this constitutional system, the king and parliament were each limited by the authority of the other. By the authority of the other. So the parliament had some checks over the king, and the king had some parliament over the powers over the parliament. So there was checks and balance. Within parliament, the power of the people in the House of Commons offset the power of the hereditary aristocracy in the House of Lords. Now, within the parliament, there were more checks. There was House of Lords and there was House of Commons. So both of them, they had checks on the power of the other. The laws enacted by king and parliament were interpreted by judges. So again, this was the third leg of the government, third organ of the government, judiciary. If the parliament would made any law which were not in the interest of the people, then the judiciary could nullify it. Though by no means always, the judges were mostly independent of king and parliament alike. जजेस के ऊपर प्रेशर भी होते थे, हमेशा वो आज़ाद नहीं होते थे, लेकिन फिर भी जुडिशरी थी, अभी भी है। In the 1700s, this was a seemingly marvelous system. अब देखिए ना, 1700 की बात है, 1700 यानी 18वीं सदी के शुरू में, अब हम 21वीं सदी में 300 साल पहले, तो उस वक्त भी ये चीज़ें अगर उन्होंने बना ली थी तो ये बड़ी बात है। Seemingly marvelous system of checks and balances and the separation of the powers within the government. Separation of power की थ्योरी आ गई ना। वैसे ये बहुत पुरानी है थ्योरी, ये तो अरिस्टोटल ने भी डिस्कस की है। अरिस्टोटल ने उस ज़माने में लिखा था, ईसा अलैहिस्सलाम से पहले, कि अपनी जो उसकी किताब है पॉलिटिक्स, उसने लिखा कि लेजिस्लेचर अलग होनी चाहिए, एग्जेक्टिव अलग होनी चाहिए और जुडिशरी अलग होनी चाहिए। Checks and balances existed among the country's major social forces. This system was widely admired in Europe. अब ये जो इतना अच्छा सिस्टम बन गया था और वो इंग्लैंड इतना तगड़ा होता जा रहा था, ताकतवर होता गया, तो फिर वो लोग सोचते हैं कि यार ये बड़े तगड़े हो गए। देखा ना, फिर ये इंग्लैंड ने पूरी दुनिया पे हुकूमत की। इतना सा है इंग्लैंड, पता है आपको, छोटा सा है इंग्लैंड, मेरा लाहौर के बराबर होगा, एक दो ज़िलों, हमारे एक दो ज़िलों के बराबर है पाकिस्तान के। फिर उसने वो यूके बनाया, फिर यूके से फिर वो बाहर निकला और उसकी सल्तनत में सूरज गुरूब ही नहीं होता था, इतनी बड़ी सल्तनत बन गई। पावर कहाँ से आई थी? क्यों पावरफुल हो गए वो? क्यों पावरफुल हो गए? अपने सियासी निज़ाम की वजह से। उनका गवर्नमेंटल सिस्टम चेक्स एंड बैलेंस की बुनियाद पर था, कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन की बुनियाद पर था, डेमोक्रेटिक था, पॉलिटिकल इक्वालिटी थी। इससे पहले हम पढ़ के आए हैं कि एक रोमन एम्पायर थी, वो उस वक्त दुनिया में सबसे बड़ी एम्पायर बन गई। किस एम्पायर की बात कर रहे हैं हम? किस एम्पायर की बात की है मैंने अभी? रोमन एम्पायर की बात की है। रोमन एम्पायर की, आपको पता है किसकी एम्पायर की बात हो रही है? रोमन एम्पायर की बात हो रही है। तो रोमन एम्पायर भी इतनी बड़ी एम्पायर बन गई, बहुत बड़ी। वो क्यों बन गई? उसकी वजह क्या थी? डेमोक्रेसी। डेमोक्रेसी, जब लोग आज़ाद होते हैं, उनके जहन आज़ाद होते हैं, उनके हुकूक हासिल होते हैं, तो वो ज़िंदगी में ज़्यादा एक्सेल करते हैं, ज़्यादा इजाज़ात करते हैं, ज़्यादा इल्म हासिल करते हैं, ज़्यादा काम करते हैं। तो अल्टीमेटली अमन हो जाता है, इंसाफ आ जाता है, जराइम कम हो जाते हैं, प्रोडक्टिविटी बढ़ जाती है, इकानमी मजबूत हो जाती है, तो वो कौम दुनिया में आगे से निकल जाती है। उससे भी से चले जाएं, सबसे ज़्यादा डेमोक्रेसी जो ग्रीक सिटी स्टेट्स थी उसमें सबसे ज़्यादा स्ट्रांग डेमोक्रेसी किसकी थी? एथेंस की। और एथेंस ही सबसे मजबूत हो गई और उसी ने सबसे बड़े फिलासफर पैदा किए, सबसे बड़े फिलासफर एथेंस में पैदा हुए। तो ये तीन बड़ी मिसालें हिस्ट्री से हमें मिलती हैं, एथेंस, रोमन एम्पायर और इंग्लैंड। ठीक है, ये तो हिस्ट्री की बात हो रही है। आज की दुनिया में आप देख लें, सबसे ज़्यादा जो हैप्पीनेस इंडेक्स है उसमें टॉप पे कौन से कंट्रीज़ हैं? हैप्पीनेस इंडेक्स का पता है आपको लोगों को? किस किस को पता है द इंडेक्स ऑफ हैप्पीनेस? आज क्लास के बाद सर्च करना ज़रा इंटरनेट के ऊपर। हैप्पीनेस इंडेक्स एक बनी हुई है, सारी दुनिया के मुल्कों का उसमें रैंकिंग होती है कि किस मुल्क के लोग सबसे ज़्यादा खुश हैं। तो उसमें अभी ये कभी उसमें नॉर्वे का नाम आता है, कभी उसमें फिनलैंड का नाम आता है, अमेरिका चौथे पाँचवें नंबर पे आता है। इस तरह मुख्तलिफ कंट्रीज़ के उसमें रैंकिंग होती है। तो उसमें आप देखेंगे कि जितने भी जो टॉप पे कंट्रीज़ हैं ना इंडेक्स ऑफ हैप्पीनेस में, वो सारे डेमोक्रेटिक कंट्रीज़ हैं, सारे डेमोक्रेटिक कंट्रीज़ हैं। जो अमीर तरीन मुल्क भी है ना जो डेमोक्रेटिक नहीं है, वो इंडेक्स ऑफ हैप्पीनेस में बहुत नीचे कहीं दूर हैं। ये जो अरब ममालिक जहाँ तेल निकलता है बड़े अमीर हैं, बट पीपल आर नॉट हैप्पी विद दिस बिकॉज ऑफ देयर सिस्टम, पॉलिटिकल सिस्टम विच इज़ रॉटनिंग। चाइना में बड़ा तरक्की हुई है, बड़ा पावरफुल हो गया है, लेकिन इंडेक्स ऑफ हैप्पीनेस में आप देखें वो नीचे, बिकॉज देयर सिस्टम इज़ नॉट डेमोक्रेटिक, दे डोंट हैव इक्वल राइट्स, they don't have equal political opportunities. Okay, they cannot criticize their government, they cannot ask for their share in power. Okay, so democracy, when the laws and policies are made for the interest of the people, for the benefit of the people, well, the governments are made to serve the people. Okay, then that is the best system under which common people, they excel, they make progress. Okay, they grow, and then the nations become stronger and richer and powerful. So this system was widely admired in Europe. Among others, it was lauded by the famous French political philosopher Montesquieu. Montesquieu ने भी इसकी बड़ी तारीफ की इंग्लैंड के सिस्टम की, डेमोक्रेटिक सिस्टम की. It was also admired in America by the framers of the Constitution. जिन्होंने अमेरिका का आइन तैयार किया, उन्होंने भी इसकी बड़ी तारीफ की, एडमायर किया इसको. Many of the framers hoped to create a republic in America. So they wanted to have a republic. जिन्होंने अमेरिका का आइन तैयार किया था वो भी एक जमहूरी निज़ाम कायम करना चाहते थे, क्योंकि वो इंग्लैंड के निज़ाम से इतना मुतासर थे. But they wanted a republic that would retain the virtues of the English system without the vices of a monarchy. हाँ, लेकिन वो बादशाहत नहीं चाहते थे. जैसे यूके में बादशाहत है ना, अमेरिका वाले चाहते थे कि हमारा बादशाह कोई ना हो, बस डेमोक्रेसी हो. The republic they helped to form would in due time provide something of a model for many other republics. तो अब ये जो अमेरिका के आइन साजों ने जो निज़ाम बनाया, वो फिर बाद में बहुत सारे मुल्कों के लिए वो एक मॉडल बन गया. So with this we conclude today's discussion. I think we have time. You can ask questions and make your comments. Yes, one second. Let me